Hi everyone, it's William. I hope you've all watched part 2 of the Dmitri video series, 3 in all, that I'm making with my friend Larry Opp. So we posted that yesterday, and it's a 6-minute overview of his life from 1917 to 1939, and then the final part will be about his life at Schatzalp, and that won't be coming for a while yet because I want to do that one at Schatzalp, so that will be next spring. Okay, so we are pushing on through the 1907 diary entries. We've got 3 to go after this one. And in the previous one, you will recall that they had all gone off on the Saturday and spent the Sunday at Ilinskaya, the estate near Moscow. And yeah, they'd tried to do a little rabbit hunting but hadn't got anything, and the whole thing had been a bit of a bust, and Dmitri wasn't in a great mood, but and he just wanted to go home. But anyway, today's diary entry starts in Ilinskaya and culminates in Moscow, so let's jump right into it. 15th October, Moscow, 1907, Monday. I got up at 7:45, got dressed, and then GM, Cook, and I had coffee upstairs with Tyotia. This morning, when we got up, it was 9 degrees below zero, so despite the flannel shirt I was wearing, I was not at all warm on the way to the station, and my hands were terribly cold. My hands are cold at the moment too, but I have to take my gloves off in order to scroll on the computer. That was not Dmitri. That was me. Okay, we resume. At 8:45, we departed, and in 45 minutes, we're at the station. Upon arrival, I had coffee again at Maria Nikolaevna's, and then from 10 to 11, I had lessons. Lunch was at 1 o'clock, and then I went to Neskuchnaya with GM, where we walked peacefully and didn't spill any blood. From 4 o'clock, when we had tea, to 6 o'clock, I again had lessons, and then I developed photographs until dinner time. After dinner, we sat around, and then I did a magic trick where a glass supposedly stands on a pin, and it turned out great. But then GM apparently got angry because Vilgashka said something in English about how they could play a joke with MN, but then Klerker made a remark while looking sideways at him, and we laughed, and he, i.e. GM, was apparently able to understand that we were talking about him. But if I may say so, I'm not as afraid of GM here as I was in the Crimea, because there's still Tyotia. But the Crimea remains a black memory for me, though it was good, but the eternal biting, the false agreement and assenting with GM stains everything that was good about it. Well, God grant that by tomorrow GM will have forgotten today's incident. Tyotia, as always, is absent-minded, inattentive, and sometimes stupid, as always. We planned to go to the theater on Thursday to see Aida. When we were at the theater last Thursday, Maria went too, though she hadn't planned to go without her fiancé, who couldn't go because of the death of the Grand Duke 1015. So just a reminder, that's the Grand Duke of Baden he's talking about, whom I believe was Wilhelm's grandfather. And yeah, let's see. My dog just distracted me. He was trying to pick a piece off my chessboard, but he only knocked it over. Oh well, it's in disarray anyhow. Okay, so I don't know if it was 9 degrees below zero. I don't understand this whole thing that they use in Russia and maybe some other countries where Dmitri will say it was 9 degrees of frost. And I don't get that. 9 degrees below zero seems awfully, awfully cold, especially if, as seems to be the case, he was not wearing gloves. But if any of you know what that would have been, then you tell me, please, because it comes up all the time in the diaries, and I don't know what to make of it. Okay, kind of surprising. It only took 45 minutes to get from Ilinskaya to Moscow. Is that right? I have to look at other diary entries about that, but maybe they had an express train or something. Then they go out to Neskuchnaya, but this time they don't spill any blood. That's an interesting way to put it. Dmitri likes to put things in interesting ways. I've discussed that with my fellow historians who are in Moscow about how he has an interesting way of writing things, and there's a little bit of the poet in him, as we know. Okay, and didn't spill any blood. Yeah, that's interesting. At the time of that he left, at the time that he left Russia in 1916, at that time he had a dog whose name we know from Maria was Palach, which means the executioner, and there was a little bit of that beneath the surface. I'm not going to tie that into the whole thing with Rasputin, because Dmitri was not a violent man. He wasn't directly involved, I believe, in the actual killing. He was, he was an accomplice. Of course, he was present. I'm not putting him out of the picture, but I think that he wasn't he wasn't the one who fired shots. There's some people say that he was the one who killed Rasputin. That's kind of a revisionist view of things, and I don't think it's true, but I'm going down a rabbit hole here, so I'll stop. At any rate, let's see. Then he does this magic trick. So you remember back in 1906, for a while, he was really into card tricks. And I would so much love to know if he had been present or had otherwise been informed. Well, I'm sure he'd been informed about the visit that Harry Houdini made to Sergei and Ella while Sergei was still governor general. And I don't know the exact year of that. I've got to look and see when Houdini was in Russia, because Sergei and Ella actually specifically invited him to come to the palace and do a little performance for them. And I don't know if Dmitri was present or not, but if he wasn't, maybe Houdini had left something behind, had given them, a little book of magic tricks or something like that. At any rate, it seems to have been something that Dmitri enjoyed, although you don't see references to it later when he was an adult. I'm not really sure how this trick could work. Putting a glass on top of a pin, I really don't know what he's describing. But I'm a big fan of Houdini's, and I've got some books of magic tricks myself, so maybe I can find that one, although it wasn't really a Houdini kind of trick. Okay, and so then we come to this really interesting part of this diary entry where we find out, firstly, that GM does not speak English. His wife does, it sounds like, although not necessarily, but he certainly doesn't. He knows a few words. He knows maybe more than they think he does, but he doesn't speak English. So that's interesting. It seems like they would want someone attached to Dmitri who could speak English with him and who would not be in the dark when Dmitri, as in this instance, was speaking English to other people. I'm not sure who Klerker is. The name comes up every once in a while, and clearly he was a part of the household, and he's with them after dinner, sort of en famille, and he makes this remark, glancing very indiscreetly at GM. And of course GM is not happy about that. Nobody wants to be talked about in their presence and laughed at. the remark is made and then everybody laughs. So I think any of us can understand why he would get angry. But when GM gets angry, it is a crisis for Dmitri. No matter who is at fault, Dmitri seems to bear the brunt of it. So he refers to the Crimea, and there was this kind of ongoing battle between GM and Aunt Minnie, and Dmitri seems to have either been forced to bear the brunt of that or to take it upon himself. And so this whole thing with GM, what was going on with him? I mean, why should Dmitri be afraid of him if he means that word literally? We know that GM was capable of hitting Dmitri, of slapping him when he got angry. And I don't know if he still would slap him when he was 16 years old. That seems unlikely, but at any rate, apparently he could really make Dmitri's life miserable. And that's what we saw in the Crimea, that Dmitri was so attentive to Laiming's mood, because if Laiming was in a bad mood, it was going to cast a pall over everything, and it was going to make Dmitri miserable himself. So then there's this sort of oblique statement that I'm not as afraid of GM here as I was in the Crimea, because there's still Tyotia. So what does that mean? Does that mean Tyotia is going to be helpful in some way? She's going to talk to GM, or does it mean that all of his worry is centered on his relationship with Tyotia, and so he's just shrugging his shoulders with whatever it is that GM does? But it seems rather serious when he talks about that the Crimean experience, even though on the surface it was good, is a black memory for me. Wow, that's not just a light kind of experience. It stained everything that was good about it. So is it an instance where the adult is being immature and the boy is the one who has to deal with that? Kind of seems that way, although unfortunately we don't have another point of view on that, so we just have to take what Dmitri says at face value, and he's hoping, God grant, that GM will not still be upset about this on the next day. And then turning to Ella, and not really being not really being upset with her, but just saying, yeah, she's kind of she's absent-minded, she's inattentive, sometimes she's stupid. So yeah, it is what it is. He uses the expression "as always" twice in a single sentence, so kind of a way of inserting a sigh, I guess you could say. And as far as her being stupid, well, Dmitri was a very smart boy and a clever boy and a smart man, and he wasn't necessarily surrounded by the smartest people. I don't know. I don't get the impression that Laiming was, a rocket scientist, to put it that way. And if Ella was, then if Ella was smart, and she probably was, then she wasn't behaving in a way that Dmitri saw as sharp. She's absent-minded, she's inattentive, and sometimes stupid. So in one of his letters to his sister that hopefully we'll go over later, you see him talk about seeing himself as a genius relative to the people around him. And of course that's silly, and it's a typical thing that a teenager would say. But on the other hand, my sense is, having the overview of his diaries, that yes, he was smarter than a lot of the people around him. And so that gave him a sense, and probably too much of a sense, of being, or even needing to be the one who's in charge, so to speak, or sort of looking down on other people, not because he was a Grand Duke, but because they were not as smart as he was. And in fact, when we look at what Dmitri does in relation to sports, when he performs badly, and he loved sports, but when he performs badly, or when playing a game or anything where he loses, it just doesn't upset him. He takes it in stride. But I can tell you from the adult diaries that when he does get upset is when he meets someone who's a genuine expert or intellectual. And the one that springs immediately to mind is Gertrude Bell, the famous British woman who worked with Lawrence of Arabia and who was an expert, spoke Arabic, and was an expert on that part of the world. And she and Dmitri met in Persia, and they took an immediate dislike to each other. And Dmitri thought that she was looking down her nose at him on intellectual grounds, and she does indeed say in her diaries that, oh yes, he's sort of stupid and puffed up, to paraphrase, and then he remarks in the diary that indeed, when he meets somebody like Gertrude Bell, whom he feels less educated than, not that he thinks he's not as smart as this person, but he feels like he's not as educated, and he can't, he's unimpressive to them. Well, that upsets him. And then he admits in his diaries that sometimes he'll try to fake it. He'll try to sort of present himself as someone more impressive than he actually is. And it's too bad that he didn't get the world's greatest education, because that was something that he could have thrived and not had that sense of inadequacy. But anyway, going on. So they're going to go to the theater on Thursday, and it's still up in the air whether Maria will go or not. At least now we know that Vilgashka is still in the picture. It's funny that he just wasn't mentioned at all when they were at Ilinskaya and when they went out hunting. So yeah, I kind of, this diary entry is very, very helpful for me, not so much as a historian, but as a novelist, because it's talking about relationships and how Dmitri saw other people and interacted with other people. And, none of this is particularly historically important. It's just, a 16-year-old boy talking about his day-to-day life. But on the other hand, it is a very important piece of the puzzle as to, how Dmitri felt about things like love. And I remember one instance in the 1921 diary entry, which possibly you recall as well if you've been watching that series, where he says that love is not something to be expressed but in words, but something to be proven by one's behavior. And I'm thinking again of what he has said both in 1906 and 1907 about I don't love. So I don't love GM, he said at one point in the 1906 diaries, and I don't love GM anymore, and then I don't love Tyotia anymore. I don't love Aunt Ella anymore. And so he has kind of a childish way of his emotional connections with people. But at least he's no longer saying, I don't think so-and-so loves me. She doesn't love me. He doesn't love me. So he seems to be a little less insecure. But anyway, I've probably talked too much this time, so I hope you'll come back for the next three, the 16th, 17th, and 18th. and then we'll be taking up where we left off with 1921. All right, bye.